When you're driving along and the car feels fine, but the moment you slow down or come to a stop, it suddenly dies. That's one of the most stressful problems a driver can deal with. It can happen at a stop sign, at a red light, or right as you pull into a parking space. People describe it a bunch of ways. My car shuts off when I stop, car stalls when coming to a stop, engine shuts off when stopped, or car stalling when stopping. It all points to the same basic issue. At idle, your engine has the least amount of momentum and the smallest margin for error. If something is slightly off with air, fuel, spark, or load control, the engine can't keep itself running. Let's go through what's happening in plain language and what you can check first before you start spending money. It's the Car Problems YouTube channel. Subscribe and let's get started. At cruising speed, the engine is spinning faster and the car's motion helps smooth out small issues. When you lift off the gas and brake, the engine computer has to quickly transition from driving power to idle control. It has to reduce fuel, adjust airflow, manage emission systems, and sometimes control things like the torque converter in an automatic transmission. At the same time, extra loads can come on, like power steering when you turn the wheel, the AC compressor cycling, or the alternator working harder at low RPM. If the engine doesn't get the right amount of air at idle, or fuel delivery is unstable, or the computer can't predict the load, it can stumble and shut off. Dirty throttle body, or a sticking idle air control system. This is one of the most common real-world causes. The throttle body is basically the air door the engine breathes through. Even when your foot is off the gas, the engine still needs a small, controlled amount of air to idle. Over time, carbon and oily buildup make the throttle plate sticky and reduce airflow. Some cars use an idle air control valve, IAC, to bypass air at idle, while many newer cars use electronic throttle control to do the same job. Here's why it stalls when stopping. You lift off the gas, the throttle closes, and the engine needs that tiny amount of clean, predictable airflow to settle into idle. If the throttle is dirty or the idle control can't react fast enough, airflow drops too low and the engine dies. Signs that point here include a rough or low idle, stalling more when the engine is warm, or stalling when you come off the highway and stop at the first light. The fix is often cleaning the throttle body and, if equipped, servicing the IAC passage. On many vehicles, after cleaning you may need an idle relearn procedure so the computer recalibrates idle airflow. A vacuum leak. That shows up most at idle. A vacuum leak is extra air entering the engine that the computer didn't measure. This makes the mixture too lean, meaning not enough fuel for the amount of air. Lean conditions are most noticeable at idle and deceleration because the engine isn't asking for much fuel to begin with. A small leak can be tolerated while driving, but at idle it can push the mixture over the edge and cause a stall. Common sources are cracked vacuum hoses, a leaking intake gasket, a PCV hose popped loose, or a brake booster vacuum line problem. If your car stalls when slowing down and you also hear a faint hiss or the idle seems to wander up and down, a vacuum leak jumps up the suspect list. Fixing it means finding the leak and repairing it. A quick visual inspection can catch loose hoses. A professional smoke test is the fastest way to find small leaks that are hard to see. Torque converter clutch not releasing on an automatic. If you drive an automatic and the car stalls as you come to a stop, this is a classic one. Inside the transmission is a torque converter, which is like a fluid coupling that lets the engine keep running even when the car is stopped in gear. At higher speeds, many cars lock the torque converter clutch to improve fuel economy. When you slow down, that clutch must release, otherwise the engine gets dragged down like you're stopping a manual transmission without pushing the clutch pedal. The feeling is very specific. The car may shudder or feel like it's lugging right before it dies. Sometimes it restarts immediately, but stalls again at the next stop. You might notice it's worse after the transmission is warm. The fix depends on the vehicle. It could be dirty or low transmission fluid, a failing TCC solenoid, valve body issues, or a transmission control problem. Scanning for transmission-related codes helps a lot here. If the stall is very consistent only when coming to a stop and drive, and the engine runs fine in park or neutral, TCC is worth checking early. Weak fuel delivery at low RPM. Fuel problems don't always show up as no power. Sometimes they show up as stalling when you stop because fuel pressure drops at idle or during decel transitions. A weak fuel pump, a clogged fuel filter on cars that still have serviceable filters, or a failing fuel pressure regulator can cause the mixture to go lean and the engine to shut off. What makes this tricky is that under acceleration, the engine may still run okay because the computer tries to compensate, but at idle, it can't stabilize. You might notice hard starts, longer cranking, or stalling that happens more when the tank is low. The fix is testing fuel pressure, not guessing. A shop can verify pressure at idle, under load, and after shutoff. If pressure falls too quickly, that points to a regulator, pump check valve, or injector leakage. Bad mass airflow sensor or dirty sensor readings. The MAF sensor tells the computer how much air is entering the engine. If it's dirty or failing, it can misreport airflow, especially during quick transitions like letting off the gas and coming to a stop. Then the computer delivers the wrong fuel amount, and the engine stalls. MAF-related stalls often come with hesitation, poor fuel economy, or weird behavior that changes with weather. Sometimes unplugging the MAF temporarily makes the car run better because the computer switches to a backup strategy. That's not a fix, but it's a clue. The fix can be cleaning the MAF sensor with proper MAF cleaner, checking for intake leaks after the sensor, and verifying the sensor's live readings on a scan tool. Never touch the sensing element with your fingers or a rag. It's delicate. EGR valve, stuck open or purge valve issues. Two emissions-related components can cause stalling at stoplights. An EGR valve, when stuck open, lets exhaust gas flow at the wrong time. At idle, that can dilute the mixture so much the engine can't keep running. You may feel rough idle and stalling, mainly when warm. A stuck-open EVAP purge valve can also act like a vacuum leak by pulling fuel vapors into the intake at idle when it shouldn't. That can make the engine stumble and die, especially right after you fill up the gas tank or on hot days. The fix is diagnosis with a scan tool and basic testing of valve operation. These are often cheap parts that cause big headaches, but you don't want to replace them blindly. Electrical or charging issues. At idle, your alternator is producing less output than at cruising RPM. If the alternator is weak, battery connections are loose, or grounds are poor, voltage can dip at idle. Modern engines rely on stable voltage for sensors, throttle control, and ignition. When voltage drops, the engine can stall, then restart like nothing happened. Clues include lights dimming at idle, flickering dash, or random electrical glitches. The fix is checking charging voltage, battery terminals, and grounds. This is often overlooked because people expect electrical issues to cause a no start, but they can absolutely cause a stall at stoplights. Quick steps to narrow it down without guessing. Start by noticing patterns. If the car stalls only when coming to a stop in drive, but stays running in neutral, think torque converter clutch or idle control reacting to load. If it stalls more with AC on or when turning the steering wheel, think idle air control, throttle body dirt, or weak charging. If it stalls mostly when warm, think throttle body, vacuum leaks, EGR, or purge valve issues. If it stalls randomly and you see flickering lights, think electrical connections or alternator output. If the check engine light is on, scan it. Even a cheap code reader can point you in the right direction. If there are no codes, live data is more helpful than codes because you can watch things like idle RPM target, throttle angle, fuel trims, and airflow readings. Once you identify the pattern and test the likely systems, you can fix it without throwing random parts at the car.